Informed.
Demerara and Essequibo 99.1 FM.
Berbice 99.5 FM. Kaieteur Radio.
The third world is not poor. You don't go to poor countries to make money. There are very few poor countries in this world. Only the people are poor. When people didn't have enough to eat, when people were driven to the edge of desperation, there's billions to be made there, to be carved out and to be taken. The capitalist European and North American powers have carved out and taken the timber, the bauxite. They have taken out of these countries. These countries are not underdeveloped. They're overexploited. They're overexploited. They're overexploited.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kiana Wilberg, senior journalist of Kaieteur News, and you're tuned into a special segment of the Lall Show. It is with a deep sense of pride and privilege that I am able to host and open the floor for this significant moment here for the Lall Show today. Over the next hour, we will hear and learn from an African legend, an anti-corruption giant, Professor Patrick Locke Otinyo Lumumba. Professor Lumumba is a distinguished Kenyan lawyer who is also recognized as one of the most knowledgeable and powerful orators across the entire African diaspora. Professor Lumumba is also the founder of several organizations, including the PLO Lumumba Foundation, a charitable organization that has been in operation since 1990, the Association of the Citizens Against Corruption, and the Movement for Dialogue and Nonviolence. He has also been twice recognized as one of the 100 most influential Africans. Ladies and gentlemen, I have not touched half of the first page of Professor Lumumba's impressive resume, but surely it is clear that we are in the midst of an African legend who will engage with our very own freedom fighter, Mr. Lall, on a number of diverse issues. Professor Lumumba, I welcome you to the Guyana audience, and the floor is now over to you, Mr. Lall.
Do we have Mr. Lumumba?
Yeah.
He's out.
He's out. Okay.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, just bear with us for a few minutes. We are trying to reconnect with Mr. Lumumba.
He's talking. He's talking.
Yeah, I'm trying to use another device which may be slightly better. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, we can, Professor Lumumba.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I think let me use this device slightly better than what I was using.
Okay. Well, Kiana, thank you. Guyana, today we are joined by a legend and a hero. When he speaks, I see war leaders and dignitaries bow their heads in shame. I see some of them twist their faces from reality, while the audience often erupt into laughter. I find this legend to be a walking university, which I have learned so much watching and listening to his presentations. Professor Lumumba, it's a pleasure to honor you on this program that is dedicated to ensuring that our people benefit from our country's wealth. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you. Can you, before I ask my first question, can you tell us what drives your passion to do what you're doing in this world today, and more so, Africa? And then I'll ask my first question to you, brother.
Thank you very much. The prime motivation is the desire to do good, because doing good for humanity is what, in my view, makes us human beings and gives us the ability to serve humanity with dignity, and particularly in the continent of Africa and Africans in the diaspora, remembering that we have many times been dehumanized, many times we have been abused, our resources have been plundered. It is the time when we must seek renaissance. And that renaissance not only requires but demands that we contextualize our conversation in the history of the world. And we must, with the zeal that is required of us, surge ahead, fearing no man, but respecting all men.
Beautiful. Beautifully put. Thank you, sir. Sir, we share almost the same culture like Africa and Asia. I went to Kenya and wanted to just shake your hands, but you were out of the country. I then moved to Ghana. Driving from Accra to Cape Coast, I noticed a huge signboard in Chinese writing, which stunned me. I had to ask the driver if Ghanaians speak Chinese. No, sir. That sign is to direct the Chinese into our gold fields. In Guyana, our governments, both past and present, giving away our resources to foreign corporations, and every day, sir, they are running to those same countries' financial institutions for loans to repair the destruction done to our infrastructure they have destroyed in the process, fetching out our wealth. Help us to understand, sir. Help us to understand this.
The lifeblood of human relations has always been trade. And if you look at the history, particularly of Africa and Asia, Africans and Asians have throughout the ages engaged in trade in a fairly positive manner. Look at the trade that took place between the Africans and the Portuguese and the Indians and the Chinese and the Arabs before slavery came in. It was based on the understanding that as human beings, we ought to engage in commerce. And indeed, one of the greatest Africans who is never celebrated as he should be, Robert Sobukwe, once famously said, there is only one race in the world, the human race. And if you look at the history of Asia and all the colonized peoples, you'll discover that trade was given its pride of place. But it must be said, particularly of the Europeans, that they have been diabolical, they have been rapacious throughout the ages. They have gone into other people's land, conquered them, imposed them on cultural dominance on them, imposed their language on them, and continue to do so. They did so to the continent of Africa through slavery, through colonization, and now through the colonial project. They went to India and did the same. They went to China and did the same. They went to Pakistan, what is now Pakistan, as a part of India, and did the same. And they have done this to the Arabs, so that when one talks about the diabolical machinations of the Caucasians throughout the world, there is evidence today. Countries such as Australia, even the United States of America, Latin America, they are examples of people who have been dominated and conquered, and after all this has happened. We see it even as we speak through the Western corporations. If you look at the agricultural sector, what the Monsantos and the Syngentas are doing. Look at Western NGOs, what they are doing. They are the latter-day Trojan horses. Look at the oil sector, what Shell have done, what Elf has done, what Total Energies have done, what ExxonMobil have done throughout different parts of the world, and what the peoples of the countries where they are received is a mere pittance, an insult. In the mining sector, look at what the De Beers have done, the Rio Tintos of this world, the Glencores of this world. And it's a sad story. And we say this because we desire that as human beings, we live in a state of mutual respect. But the Caucasians do not do that. That is not to say that they are not good Caucasians. They are. But the conceptual, organized, institutionalized corporations of the West, whether through governments or private sector, do not mean well wherever they go. Increasingly, of course, we are now seeing other players, the Chinese. Perhaps the Chinese are a little bit more subtle. They are not as covertly arrogant as the Caucasians are, but they are subterraneanly beginning to do the very same things, complete with cultural arrogance. And this is what annoys some of us, that throughout the ages, if you come to the continent of Africa, what Africa has given the world, whether they are in the diaspora, and what Asia has given to the world, has been compassion and love. But the reciprocation has been insult and abuse throughout the ages. And this must be condemned, and this must be fought, and this must be resisted, because the desire of the West as it is now, stated or unstated, is to continue the culture of dominance. And you see this arrogance on a daily basis. And this is something that is undesirable if we want to create a world where we are all equal.
I hear you loud and clear, brother. To what extent do you blame our leaders for poverty?
You know, most of our so-called leaders, I don't use the word leaders when I'm making reference to many individuals who occupy public office. And if I use the word leaders, it's in a very loose sense. In fact, I dare say that most of the individuals who occupy public space in many of our countries are misleaders, because many of them have been compromised, many of them are not patriotic, many of them do not have the interest of their countries at heart, many of them are manipulated, many of them are essentially fifth columnists whose only claim to fame is that they use their public office to do that which is not in the interest of the country. And to the extent that we too follow them, we are complicit, and therefore we are co-authors of our misfortune. When you see the activities of some of the individuals in our countries, look at a number of countries, what the West have done through, and I'm talking about the mining sector. Look at countries such as the Democratic Republic of Congo, which on paper is the richest country on earth. And look at the levels of poverty. And look at how their leaders, so-called leaders, sign away their birthright. Look at the kind of damage that oil companies have visited in countries such as Nigeria, Angola, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, and even in Venezuela, even in your own country in Guyana now, you can see what companies such as ExxonMobil are trying to do, and how they are trying to take away your natural wealth and patrimony for a pittance. And our leaders are there signing on the dotted lines. So that it is a sad thing, because history has demonstrated not once, not twice, that when leadership is respectful of their people, then those countries realize their potential. And I can give examples. See people like Lee Kuan Yew, what they did with a country that had nothing in Singapore, see people like Mahathir Mohamad in Malaysia, and one can give many examples. But what do we see now in many of our countries? Countries that are being raped on a daily basis, countries that are being abused on a daily basis. And what we have at the end of the day are individuals who themselves are not interested, and we are impoverished for this generation and generations yet to be born. So it is a sad thing, and we say it with the conviction that we have, and we are urging others who think like us to make demands of those politicians who are a curse on our nations.
Sir, are we being recolonized by the first world countries? What's your opinion?
Oh, the process of recolonization is alive and well. You only have to have listened to the resolutions that came out of the G7 meeting in Hiroshima last week, where effectively the Western powers and the Japanese, who are being buttonholed into the arrangement, are essentially telling the world, you must do our bidding. And if you don't do our bidding, we are going to beat you into a pulp. And you can see that there are different ways in which the colonial project is being advanced. It is through gunboat diplomacy. It is through economic domination, through the Bretton Woods institutions, namely the IMF and the World Bank. It is through other means which are subtle and not so subtle. And you can see that most of the world has now become a theater. Africa has become a theater where the United States of America is now actively using, as one may, with the Chinese, with the Turks, with the Russians. And if you come to the Caribbean, it is the same thing. They are using, and I see in places like Barbados, my good friend Mia Motley are coming out to resist it. And if you go to Latin America, you can see the same thing is happening. If you go to Asia, the same thing is happening. And if you go to Eastern Europe, you can see the expansion of NATO. And it is quite clear that the agenda is alive and well. And Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana said that neocolonization is the last stage of imperialism. And it is the worst. It is the worst because at that time, the imperial powers are prepared to use force. And you can now see with the advent of artificial intelligence, they can deploy drones, which are possibly weaponized in order to make us succumb and to be subdued through their diabolical machinations. In a nutshell, if the rest of the world is not organized militarily, politically, and economically, we are going into the phase of colonization in a manner that has never been seen in the world before. And you can see how the military bases are being spread throughout the world. And the message is clear. You play ball or we nuclear you out of the face of this earth. And you only have to listen to American politicians, American diplomats. You only have to listen to the British politicians after Brexit, and you only have to listen to the arrogance of the bureaucrats from the European Union to know that they no longer care. They are going to do what they want, and if you don't want them to do it, they are going to force you to do it. This is what they are saying.
Wow. Sir, why are so many of our leaders not speaking out against foreign exploitation by these multinational corporations? And I also mean the religious leaders, the legal profession, Chamber of Commerce, the private sectors, and more so, the media. Why no one?
Now, my brother, let's look at each one of them one by one. Let's look at the media, the dominant Western media, to mean the CNNs of this world, to mean the Al Jazeeras of this world, to mean the BBC, to mean Radio Deutsche Welle, to mean Radio France. They have an agenda which is clear. There is something that they are meant to articulate and to disseminate. And therefore, they only speak such things as are in consonance with the grand agenda of the conceptual West. And even in China, you can see that the Chinese who are Johnny-come-latelys into the arena of colonization, they are using the media such as CGTN, and even the news gathering bodies such as Xinhua or Reuters or Agence France. All these are designed to articulate an agenda and to propagandize. So propagandization is one of the things that is being used to sell a narrative. So the media is not going
to lose him.
Professor Lumumba, your mic is off.
Your mic is off. Yeah, he's back.
You're back on, sir.
We missed
the private sector as we know it is also what, if you look at the world today, the Western private sector, and I want you to go into several sectors. Look at the pharmaceutical industry. If you look at the pharmaceutical industry and you see the dominance of Western pharmacies, and COVID did reveal the reality to us, then you can see the imperialism in the medical sector. Look at the agricultural sector and see what is being done by companies such as Monsanto. Look at the mining sector. And therefore, the chambers of commerce that are built around this is articulating what is in the best interest of the West. And if you look at even the COP in the arena of climate change, and you see the meetings and the discourse that is undertaken there, all the others from different parts of the world are merely playing the gooseberry, and they do not play a role that is pivotal in all these. But beyond and without blaming all these other institutions, the so-called global South must also organize itself. Part of the Achilles heel of the global South is disorganization. You will remember in the early 1960s, when the global South was a little bit more organized with what was then called the non-aligned movement, articulated and driven by people like India's Jawaharlal Nehru, Yugoslavia's Joseph Broz Tito, Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Gamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt. At that time, the non-aligned movement was a counterweight, and they were able to articulate issues politically, economically, and otherwise. Today, the global South is disorganized, and you will see, therefore, that economically the dollarization of the world has made it impossible for countries to extricate themselves from the economic dominance of the West through the Bretton Woods institution. So going forward, it is important that there is organization, and I'm beginning to hear voices. I'm beginning to hear voices like in the Caribbean, people like Mia Motley are now coming out and saying this cannot be done. I'm hearing voices from the continent of Africa, individuals such as Paul Kagame are beginning to come out. I'm talking about at the political level. Outside of politics, I'm also hearing voices. And if you go to Latin America is a little bit lukewarm now. But people like Lula, one would expect that Lula would come out a lot more strongly. And one wants to see a congregation of individuals who are going to be the counterweight of this reemergence of imperialism, which right now is multi-pronged. We are not only dealing with the conceptual West, We are dealing with a power like the United Kingdom, which has moved out of the European Union and is trying to reassert herself by coming up through her former colonies. We are seeing a resurgent China. We are seeing Turkey. We are seeing the Emiratis and the Qataris, so that there is an onslaught. They are a group, a pack of hunters that are trying to hunt in Africa, hunt in the Caribbean, hunt in Latin America. And if we are not careful, they are going to subdue us. And this time round, it is not going to be easy. And they are going to ensure that we never rise again. So the time is now for a new movement to emerge. The time is now for Africa and Africans in the diaspora, for Asians and Asians in the diaspora, to do what is necessary, not to oppose them for opposition's sake, but to engage with them with the firmness that will remove scales from their eyes and will melt the wax in their ears, that they are better able to appreciate that the long-term health of the world requires that we enjoy a symbiotic relationship rather than a parasitic relationship.
Thank you for that answer, sir. Sir, what advice do you have for our local private sector, Chamber of Commerce, our local media, our religious leaders, and the legal profession, who is sitting back quietly, looking at the exploitation of this country, and they are silent? What advice do you have?
There is a book which I commend to those who have not read it. It is a book by the South Korean Ha-Joon Chang. The title is The Bad Samaritan. And Ha-Joon Chang in The Bad Samaritan says, among other things, that what the Western world has done is that once they use the ladder to climb up to the mountain, they have thrown the ladder away and they do not want anybody to use it to climb up. And what they are doing is to make prescriptions for others which are merely placebos, not designed to cure anything. So what must we do? We must do what others did. And in the recent past, we know countries such as South Korea, Singapore, Malaysia, you must have an element of protection of your emerging industries. So that if an industry is emerging, say in Guyana, and is in the area of oil and gas, it will be necessary to engage with the major players, but on your own terms, a symbiotic relationship that not only guarantees, but ensures that there'll be transfer of technology over a period, that you enter into contractual arrangements which ensure that local content is given its pride of place, an arrangement that ensures that if it is oil, you refine it so that you get the benefit of the things that come out of it as byproducts. You don't send away the crude. There is value addition. So if you do that, then in the fullness of time, you'll create an army of individuals who are grounded in the oil and gas sector. If it is in the mining sector, you do that. If it is the professions, you must also protect the profession and require those who are coming from outside to enter into an alliance with those who are the indigents of a particular country. So that if I were to come from the United States of America, you must require of me to enter into an arrangement with a Guyanese so that that Guyanese benefits from my expertise. And government must, in the nature of things, also enact laws that will create a facilitative environment that enables private sector in a small country to thrive. Because if you open Guyana or Barbados or St. Kitts and Nevis or St. Lucia to the mandarins and the piranhas from China and the United States of America, you will be swallowed whole. So it is important, and this has been done over the years and over the ages. And what we are asking is, do this so that we too can come of age. We are beginning to see, for example, Vietnam, which was devastated in the 1970s, and Cambodia and Laos. They are coming up because of these laws that were specifically enacted to ring fence certain areas so that you do not have to compete with people who are not of your weight. It is Julius Kambarage of Nyerere of Tanzania who said that if you are conducting a boxing match, the rules are the same, but you do not put a lightweight and a heavyweight in the same ring. It will be murder. It will no longer be a game. So we must appreciate those realities and create an environment that allows for growth. And the relationship, as I've said, and I'm reiterating and repeating, must be symbiotic rather than parasitic, because we are also a part of the same world. But the history of the West is a history of abuse and dehumanization. And once bitten, twice shy.
Professor Lumumba, I would like to jump in here and just follow up quickly on your statements just now, because it underscores something that I heard from you at May 18th symposium. It was the 10th National Security Symposium organized by the Rwanda Defense Force. And you said citizens have a responsibility when it comes to politics and the leaders they elect. Can you expound a bit on this, please? Because you mentioned during that symposium that it is the right of citizens to make demands. Over to you, sir.
You know, when you ask that question, I am reminded of the words that were spoken by the former president of Philippines, Corazon Cojuangco Aquino. Cojuangco Aquino said that if you have a country where the population is ignorant and you talk about democracy, that is not a democracy, but a conspiracy of fools. It is incumbent upon a people and leaders to ensure that their population has information. Because when you have information, then you create civil awareness or civic awareness. And when the population is civically empowered, then they are capable of making decisions. And when they are capable of making decisions, they are capable of making demands. And when they are capable of making demands upon information, they'll make demands that will ensure that the quality of their lives is improved, whether it is in education, whether it's in health, whether it's in agriculture, whether it's in technology. And if that is the case, when they are called upon to elect their leaders, they'll elect their leaders on the basis of their agenda rather than on the basis of their ethnic extraction, ethnic extraction or corruption. And that is why I hold the view that the quality of democracy that a people enjoy is directly proportional to their civic awareness, which is founded upon knowledge rather than ignorance.
Thank you, sir. And just finally from me, we're seeing across the world the rise of loans from China and the USA. How do we break this cycle of begging?
If I understand you well, the world is no longer a unipolar world. You remember that after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the United States of America became the hegemon, and all the European countries then became America's lapdogs. Then suddenly China has emerged, and China is emerging in a very subtle way. It has become the factory of the world. It is engaged in the world with infrastructure, and everybody else is fundamentally gravitating towards China or gravitating to the United States of America. Russia lost her traction. But the question is that the kind of world that we want? And I hear the world saying no. We want a multilateral engagement in the world in order to ensure that the Chinese and the Americans don't dominate us. And you can now begin to see the rise of organizations or loose arrangements such as the BRICS, which is bringing together not only the Chinese themselves, but it's bringing together the Indians, the Brazilians, the South Africans. And as of today, I think there are almost 15 countries that have applied to join the BRICS, which is a good thing. Because I think that the Chinese have their own problems, but the Chinese are trying now to behave like gentle giants. They are saying, we are a giant, but we want to be gentle. You remember these words of William Shakespeare, you may have the powers of a giant, but do not use them tyrannously. But when you listen to the bureaucrats from the United States of America, first, what makes you unhappy is the sheer arrogance. The arrogance from the West is annoying. They proceed from the premise that everybody else in the world is a fool. We do not know what we want. We are little children to be dictated to. They want to choose who your friends are. They want to choose what you eat. They want to choose what you wear. And that I find annoying. And that I find unfortunate. The Chinese are a little different in this regard. They create the impression that we are in an embrace which is friendly. And that is what makes them a lot more appealing going forward. But even the Chinese, we must be aware of them. This could be a very subtle way of entering into the arena and then doing what they want to do. So our guards must be always up. Our antenna must be up. And that requires organization. That is why, for example, in the Caribbean, the CARICOM movement is important. So that it's not only Guyana that is moving as Guyana. You want to move with Antigua and Barbuda. You want to move with Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaicans and Kitts and Nevis and all the rest. In Africa, you want the African Union. In Latin America, you want the same thing. In Asia. Once we do that, the message is going to be sent clearly and eloquently that we are going to engage from a standpoint of mutual respect.
Thank you, sir. Over to you, Mr. Lall. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lumumba.
Thank you.
Let me ask, what should the citizens do to ensure that they get better deals from the development of their natural resources? And how can they hold their leaders, yes, these leaders, accountable for good governance? You're an expert on that.
You know, there is no one size fits all. So one cannot have a prescription that is uniform and universal. But there is one ingredient that I think is necessary in all these, that the led must make demands of their leaders consistently and firmly. And if there is one area in the world that has succeeded in doing this, is the Scandinavian countries. If you look to the Scandinavian countries such as Norway, Denmark, Finland, and Sweden, look at their levels of taxation, sometimes in the neighborhood of 52%. And if any one leader misbehaves, then they are punished. They are sent to jail. Because impunity is one of the things that makes us suffer. That you have these individuals who engage in what I call theft on an industrial scale. And once they have stolen our hard-earned taxes, which we pay to government, then we elect them into public office. What we must do is to punish thieves, to punish kleptocrats. And if we punish kleptocrats, then the message is sent. When we tell them that we want our taxes to be used properly, we want proper public transport system, we want proper education system, we want proper health system, then we will ensure that they do the right thing. And when we are called upon to elect them, we too must elect people. You know, one of the things that happens, particularly in multi-ethnic societies, is that we are quick to say, I'm going to elect one who is one from my own community. But what do you want? It is Chairman, I think it's Deng Xiaoping, and this was articulated by Lee Kuan Yew. He said what he called the MPC. When you are appointing people, MPC, M for meritocracy, P for pragmatism. When you want to catch a rat or a mouse, what you want is not a black or a white cat. You just want a cat that will catch the damn mice of the damn rat. Pragmatic. Then the third thing, honesty. Honest men and women. And it is not difficult to find honest men and women when you look. And you must have amores. In proper leadership, there must be taboos, the do's and the don'ts. Who is the Guyanese? This is the question. When you see a person from Guyana, what defines a Guyanese? What defines somebody from Trinidad and Tobago? So each one of us in our societies must be able to define ourselves by positive things. When we talk about Singapore, we know it is about hard work. It is about honesty. Each one of our countries must be able to say, I am a Guyanese, and if there is one thing that Guyana sells to the world, is that we do the right thing regardless. And if this is what they do, the message will be sent to the electorate. It must be taught in schools. What are we teaching our young men and women in kindergarten? Because it must start as nursery rhymes. And when they do it often enough, by the time they mature into high school and they go into the university, then it becomes their factory setting. The setting to do good and to do right, to be patriotic. This is what we must do.
Oh, Guyana. How I wish I could add to what you're saying there. How do we describe Guyanese politicians? If only you get a clue of what's happening in this country, I think 99.99% of them belong behind bars. Yes. Corruption.
The time is now.
Corruption is from top to bottom. I looked at a TikTok you sent out in which you said, Ikulu ni mahali patakatifu. And yes. I could not have loved those words. I don't know if I pronounced it right, but it pierced my soul. Expound on it, please.
It is Mwalimu Nyerere of Tanzania who used to say that if you see, and I'll render it in English, although it's much more beautiful in Kiswahili, that if you see any individual who is too keen to go into public office, particularly to seek the presidency, you must avoid such an individual as you would a leper. Because the state house or government house is a holy place. You must never convert it into a den of thieves. And that is critical because the fish, as we say in Kiswahili, the fish rots from the head. When the head is rotten, then the whole fish is rotten. The message must come consistently from the top that this is a taboo. If you engage in this, whether you are my father, mother...
You cut him off.
Turn on his mic.
Your mic is off, sir.
Your mic is off.
Professor Lumumba?
Your mic is off.
No, we can't hear you. It's
Hear me now.
Yes. Continue.
Yes, so I'm saying that it is critical that we ensure that the top sends a clear and unequivocal message. And that message shall be, we want things done right, and if you don't do the right things, there are consequences. And history has demonstrated not once, not twice, Even the societies that we now think are clean, relatively clean, they have had their difficult times when they were thieves in occupation of office, when it used to be said in certain countries that the mafia controlled their government, and they went out. So it must be a deliberate decision on the part of the people of any country that enough is enough. We have dug the hole too deep. We have swum into blood so deep that our salvation not only requires but demands that we wade back for our national health. And all these battles, I keep on saying almost ad nauseum, are intergenerational battles. You know, sometimes when I look at the world and I try certain analogies, there are people who metaphorically stayed in the Egypt of corruption for so long that even when they move out of Egypt physically, Egypt is still in their hearts. And such people require exorcism. And exorcism means that they must be punished. Their ill-gotten wealth must be forfeited to the state. The Chinese do that, and they do it effectively. Right now, I know the Angolans are doing that in the continent of Africa. Right now, I know the Tanzanians are doing that in the continent of Africa. I know the Rwandese are doing it in the continent of Africa. I know Mauritius is doing it in the continent of Africa. And they are sending clear message that kleptomania and kleptocrats that they produce must be dealt with firmly, boldly, and unapologetically.
Guyana, would that ever happen in this country?
Only time will tell.
Sir.
It will. Oh, it will. You will be shocked. There are nations which have waded so deep in blood, but at a certain stage, people simply say, enough is enough. But the voices of reason must keep on awake and alive, even when they cannot be heard at their most eloquent. They must continue to be heard. It is darkest before them.
You are an attorney at law. Our country has signed a deal with ExxonMobil, one of the worst ever in the history of mankind. 2%, a 50% profit share after 75% comes out up front as cost oil before profit is being shared. Basically, we get nothing. Nothing. A new government, when in opposition, this present government, when in opposition, promised that when they get, or if they get into power, they will renegotiate this contract. Today, nada, nothing. They are holding on to this old biblical term, sanctity of contract, sir. As a lawyer, tell us, what's your opinion on sanctity of contract? Does that mean that circumstances, if it change, it stops you from touching that contract?
You know, we must not use black letter law to legitimize the legitimate. We must not have laws which are purged of moral content. You know, the law can't be an ass. And we have seen illegitimate things made legitimate. Apartheid was made legitimate and legal. Nazi Germany was legal. And my own view is that if a contract is parasitic, it is incumbent upon the people of Guyana, by invoking the jurisdiction of their courts, and if they can't they can invoke the jurisdiction of other international tribunals to ensure that that unfavorable contract is nullified. It is improper to have a contract which legitimizes theft. And I have some idea of the contract that the government of Guyana has entered into with ExxonMobil. It is theft, and it must be described as theft. It is incumbent upon ExxonMobil. The America, which is the home of ExxonMobil, would not allow such a contract to be signed in the United States of America.
Exactly.
And what must therefore happen is that the government and your parliament must come out clearly, and the people, civic organizations in Guyana must come out clearly and send a clear message to ExxonMobil. If it cannot be done in Guyana, you must also get attorneys in the United States of America to file suits in the United States, so that you enter into an arrangement that makes sense, which enjoins ExxonMobil to ensure, number one, that there is local content is taken care of, to ensure that the dividends are shared in an equitable manner, because in the early days, you may need their technology, and it also must ensure that that technology transfer will begin to happen within a period which is described. But if you allow yourself to go into these unfavorable contracts, you will suffer the fate of a country like Nigeria, which suffered under Shell BP for a very long time. You will suffer the fate of Gabon and Congo, which suffered under ELF. You will suffer the fate of Angola, which also suffered under ExxonMobil. And there are many stories. And remember, these companies, particularly in the oil sector, because they monopolize technology, they don't care. They don't have a conscience. They are there to reap and rape, and they must be stopped by clear and unequivocal voices. Remember that what they do with our politicians is that they buy them for a song. The politicians are bought for a song. They buy them apartments in Dubai and in Guyana and keep money for them in Panama and other places, and buy them holiday homes in Miami. So if you rely on your politicians only as the bulwark against the diabolical machination of these multinationals, then you are sunk and sunk until the second coming.
But sir, at present, both the government and the opposition are completely silent on renegotiation of this lopsided contract with Exxon. Do you have any message for the people of this country?
I hope that let me say this. What the ExxonMobils and indeed many companies from the West do is that they succeed in silencing politicians. And it matters not whether they are in opposition or in government. When they want to silence them, they silence them subtly. And what they do is that they are capable of intelligence gathering, so that they know quite a number of skeletons in your closet. And if you want to make noise, they send you a video and tell you, do you want us to reveal this, or you will remain silent until Jesus comes? And then you choose to remain silent. So what must happen is that civic organization must come up. And even politicians who truly love Guyana must come up. Some of us have been engaged in this kind of activities in the continent of Africa, and we demand of politicians. And media houses such as yours must continue to make noise. It is not an easy thing. Even your life could be on the line. You must always remember that when you confront these multinationals and you threaten them, your life itself could be on the line. But cowards die many times. If you are doing the right thing, do it.
I hear you. I hear you loud and clear, my brother. I think the Guyanese people would be smiling in their hearts listening to you. Back to this contract, this lopsided contract. The permits that are being granted to ExxonMobil requires ExxonMobil giving us unlimited parent company guarantee. Both government and opposition has been for 8 years today talking about, yes, it's coming, yes, it's coming. It's not coming, but every year, project after project being approved without that parent company guarantee from an oil spill. 2 citizens, ordinary citizens, moved to the court, got a judge's decision. The judge ruled that ExxonMobil must give Guyana full protection within 30 days or cease operation. The same government that was talking every single day how they're working on this parent company guarantee, they're getting it, it's coming, it's here. Government within hours appealed that judge's decision. Who is safeguarding? Who has ordered ExxonMobil to safeguard this country and its people, including the region as a whole? What do you say? What do you say to the people of this country?
What I say is that, first of all, it is not easy. It's easier said than done. But governments must do what is in the best interest of their countries and their countrymen and women. Sometimes and many times governments don't do that, and we are frustrated by it. So what must we do? Of course, I am a respecter of order and therefore say, let us exhaust the legal avenue. If they have chosen to appeal, then your duty now is to put together a team of lawyers to fight it firmly and hard. And if it fails, even in the higher court, to look at other jurisdictions. That is the legal avenue that must be followed. But it's also important for the civic society to present petitions to government. And if that is not sufficient, to make petitions to the mother company in the United States of America to see whether they can be touched. These are the avenues, these are the legal avenues that must be used. And I think if you are sufficiently consistent, and we saw these in the case of Nigeria with Shell BP, that petitions were made and ultimately, after many years, the right thing started being done. So it is not a sprint, it is a marathon race. Remember, companies that we are talking about have gotten used to getting away with murder over the years. So it is not easy. It is asking the leopard to abandon its spots. It is not easy. It is not for the faint-hearted. So you who are involved, the Guyanese, must never give up. And remember this, even an ant can make an elephant very uncomfortable. Be the ant that makes the elephant uncomfortable.
I asked you earlier about what do you say about the lawyers, their silence. It is so difficult to get lawyers today in my country to even take a case against ExxonMobil. Where do we go from here?
The Law Society of Guyana must act corporately, because let me tell you, and these are things that happen in the world, that bodies such as ExxonMobil can also, in a very subtle way, threaten lawyers into inaction, so that they don't tell you not to take a case, but circumstances and environments are created that make you know that if you take a case against us, we are going to ensure that you are not very comfortable. So it could very well be, and Guyana is a small country with a small legal fraternity. So you may find yourself in such a situation. But I believe that even out of that small fraternity, there must emerge some lawyer who is capable of saying, let the chips fall where they may. Some of them may not even be young, old lawyers. Even a young lawyer, sometimes if you can get one who is brave, and I'm sure there must be one. I'm sure there must be one. And if they can't be found, you go outside of Guyana. I know they'll be told that they do not have the license to practice in Guyana, but let it be tried. I remember during the struggle for independence in this country, lawyers had to be imported to come and argue against or in behalf of those people who are characterized as terrorists. And I hold the view in matters such as these, where you are talking about oil and gas, even the concept of universal jurisdiction is one that can be tried. So we can never be out of options. And the fact that we are having this conversation is in itself indicative of the fact of what can be done. Technology has now ensured that geography is compressed. And me, who is become very knowledgeable of what is happening in Guyana, our duty is also to raise these issues at such forums as we are in, when we are talking about a resource abused by these multinationals. It is our duty to keep on making noise, organized noise, in the hope that they will be irritated into positive action.
Every day that goes by in this country, I'm amused, heading a newspaper and radio station. That contract is so one-sided, but it also comes with this 50-50 profit sharing, in which costs are being grabbed out, snuffed out, in which Commonwealth, for example, decommissioning costs is a great bit, keeps coming out from every project every year in the hundreds of millions of American dollars. Commonwealth puts out a statement that says oil producing countries must take note and look at the decommissioning cost, because these oil gangsters can move from hundreds of millions to billions. When that question was put by my reporter to our president, he asked my reporter if Commonwealth named Guyana. What do you tell me? Help me to understand. Tell this nation.
The question of sovereignty is one that you can never explain away. Right now, I'll give you an example. Right now, as I speak, the government of Botswana is renegotiating a contract with the De Beers. And the president of Botswana has insisted that the amount of revenue that is generated must be shared in a manner that makes sense. You can see in that case that there is commitment by the government. And it is true that the president of Guyana or the president of Guyana will say, this is my country. I don't want anybody to interfere. And you can't quarrel with him on that. Say, what role has the common? On that, I agree with him. On the question of sovereignty. But once you have talked about your sovereignty, use it for the benefit of your people. This is what we are saying. So what you must do is to, sometimes I think, and I am not saying that this is the case, that some of these individuals may have been boxed into a corner and they are so uncomfortable that when you ask these questions, it's not as if they don't agree with you. They actually agree with you, but they are victims of the unknown, because these multinationals are capable of tying you down in a manner that they don't give you wiggle room. And it is therefore important that other support institutions, such as the civil society, such as parliament, such as the media, such as the chambers of commerce, say what the president cannot say. The president's hands may be so firmly tied that when you are interviewing him, there are people who are waiting for the result of that interview and tell you, oh, this is what you are now saying. And you know what we did to you? We just forgave you your debts as a country, and you are up for the next election. Many of these individuals are looking up to the next election, and they don't want to irritate those people who may be important to them in that electoral exercise. So it frustrates you. It frustrates people of goodwill. But I think that it is important to have the backing of all these major players. I remember the former president of Tanzania, John Joseph Pombe Magufuli, inherited a government where one of the big mining companies had not paid taxes for 20 years. But when he went there, he said, you are going to pay taxes. And they paid taxes, and they entered, renegotiated the contract, formed a special vehicle which both the company is involved and the government is involved, and they have now said this is how the proceeds are going to be shared. Because the other reality is that you need the ExxonMobils because of technology. But as the saying goes, when you are dining with the devil, you must have long spoons. And this is what we are urging the Guyanese government. Always know that when you are supping with these organizations is metaphorically supping with the devil, and you must make long spoons. And if you don't have long spoons, borrow them.
Let's leave the government out. Let's talk me, you. We're partners.
Yes.
We're partners in a business. I'm the investor. I'm investing 30, 40 million or $1 billion. You in a half and half, 50-50 business. Now, wouldn't you want to cap the interest rates?
No. Let me tell you all these things. Now, there is also the practical dimension of it. That if your government has bad negotiators, then they'll always lose out. You remember this old saying that when you want an apple, ask for an orchard. So your typical private sector will ask for an orchard. And if you are not very careful when you are signing the contract, you'll sign out the orchard. But yet they were prepared to take not even a tree, but an apple. So one of the most important things when you are sending out your negotiating team, send out your best men and women. Don't send out individuals who will be given a per diem. And once they are given a per diem and have consumed copious amounts of wine, then they ask, where do I sign? And many countries in the global south find themselves in that situation. And these private companies, these multinationals, will come with a team of negotiators, even 90 of them, and you have sent only 2 individuals. You can't compete. So going forward, it is also important to ensure that you have sufficient expertise so that you and me who are negotiating even on matters as not mundane, matters as important as interest, hedging, and all those things that are critical to contracts, you make sure that they are there. Even on the question, in the event of a dispute, where do you have the dispute resolved? Do you have it resolved in Guyana, or you have it resolved in the United States? Which currency is being used? Recently, I was involved in negotiating a contract for a company which was in Liberia. And they brought me a contract by a Chinese company, and they said in the event of a dispute, the dispute will be resolved in Beijing. I said, no. The thing that is happening, all the business is in Monrovia, and the dispute will be resolved in Monrovia. And we changed the contract. If we had not looked at it, we would have said Beijing. But when you are doing these things in Beijing, that is the home of the hyenas. They'll eat you alive because that is their territory. So sometimes we blame these multinationals, but they also take advantage of our own weaknesses because we don't present our best and we don't put our best foot forward. And sometimes governments are also desperate. You find yourselves in a situation where you want money, and some of these fellows are going to tell you, you must sell us concession for the next 27 years, and then we are going to give you money to build roads and to finance your hospitals, finance your agriculture, so that you look good before the electorate, so that you are elected. And when you are elected, we know our interest is being protected. So there is a myriad of issues. And you being a seasoned journalist, you know that these things are very highly nuanced. And it is our duty, therefore, to ensure that we safeguard our countries so that we are not beholden to these individuals because of the next election, but we are protecting our patrimony for the sake of the next generation.
I hear you loud and clear. Remember, we are talking as two brothers. We are not bringing in government here. We have a bad contract. We have a bad contract. Insurance protection is a problem. We have decommissioning an issue. Capping of interest rates is an issue. Now, let's talk like brothers. I'm spending. Don't you have a right to see the expenses? Come on.
Of course.
Come on. And when you ask for the expenses, you're being told, well, you know, if you get these expenses, you will nitpick on it. This is what is being told to the media when asked about monthly expenses from oil companies. How do you respond to that?
My view is, and this is now in the realm of the law of contract, that when you enter into a contract, the contracts are entered into on the basis of utmost good faith, particularly when there are contracts that deal with public resources. They must therefore, in the nature of things, be in the public domain. So that if there is a public portal or a government portal, for example, the website of the relevant ministry, the ministry that is in charge of petroleum, all these contracts should actually be available on their portal for public scrutiny. And if they are not available, if your law allows, and even if it does not, it is important that you try it out in court and say, we want this information to be in the public domain because this is our patrimony. And we call them contracts uberima e fide, of utmost good faith. And some of these, of course, companies will redact certain things so that you don't see the most important things are redacted. And that, once again, as I said at the outset, depends on the quality of the legal service that you have. When it's a governmental contract, what would the Office of the Attorney General have done? The good Attorney General will, if they do not have internal capacity, get external capacity and ensure that it is properly done. But what do? This multinational. They can even come and tell you, even that other capacity that we need, we are going to bring it to you. So they are the ones who are paying the extra support that you need, and they'll do their bidding. So without belaboring the issue, my own view is this. If you find yourselves suddenly saddled with a bad contract, it is important to begin to ask whether it is not up for negotiation. And this idea that you have a contract which is set in stone, which cannot be changed. And they'll tell you, because you signed, if you now want to get out of the contract, we are going to slap you with damages and that kind of thing. We are going to ensure that you are blacklisted. We are going to ensure that your oil and gas cannot be sold. These are the threats that they normally use. But if you have a strong government, and I saw it, as I said, with the government of the United Republic of Tanzania, if you have a strong government, you'll discover that there are so many countries in the world that are suffering the same fate, and they will fight from your corner.
Sir, our oil contract speaks of renegotiation if both parties agreed. Neither the opposition nor the government is opening their mouth to ask for a renegotiation. Just last week, ExxonMobil had a press conference in which one of my reporters shoot the question to Exxon, hey, with all these oil finds you guys receiving, unearthing on a daily basis, what? Aren't you going to give Guyana something else? He said, no, we have a good contract. She pressed on that question again and asked him, are you guys willing to walk away if Guyana demands a renegotiation? And they said, no, not so easily. Now, I put that to you, sir, because here is a journalist asking that question to ExxonMobil, rather than the opposition or the government of the day asking Exxon to come back to the table and let's renegotiate.
You know, in your neighborhood, you have a country that has dealt with these oil contracts in a manner that is considered to be model in the world, Trinidad and Tobago. And the Trinidadian and Tobago model is actually a model that is being used. I know, for example, that the Ugandans who are going to begin to pump their oil use some aspect of the Trinidad and Tobago model. And I know, for example, that the Uganda-Tanzanian pipeline that is transporting oil from Uganda through to the port of Tanga was held up because the European Union and Total Energies did not want a refinery built by the Ugandans. And the answer to your question is informed by that reality. Sometimes, as I've already said, the government types will say nothing because either they have been intimidated into silence or they have been bought into silence. So it is the duty of organizations outside of government to act like gadflies. It is you who must wake the government and force the hand of government by way of asking these questions. And you know, the ExxonMobils, they are like countries. If you look at the profit that is generated by ExxonMobil, I think it is larger than the GDP of all Caribbean countries combined. So that is who you are dealing with, a juggernaut. And when you ask your question as a journalist, is know that it will be in the public domain for 1 or 2 weeks, and they are used to this kind of thing because their skins have become thick over the years. So the effort at fighting it must be consistent and must be multi-pronged. This is the only way in which you can deal with it. And you will win some of the battles, you lose some of the battles, but you keep on fighting. And these are, look at Nigeria, for example, which has fought this for the last many years through local content, and it became even violent with the communities rising up against Shell and BP. So one does not want it to degenerate into that. One wants to ensure that it's done in a civil manner using all the legal arsenal that is available for purposes of achieving the desired result.
Sir, let me put it this way. The contract that sits with us today, what we are receiving on a quarterly or a yearly basis cannot compensate for the damages, a 1/10 of the damages being done to this country. Now, where do we go from there? We are looking at more destruction than development of a nation with its resources. What do you say to that?
My own view is that there are many models that you can deal with, many approaches that you can use by way of seeking to protect your situation. As it is now, there is a sense in which you will have to count some of the losses. And I would urge you to guide individuals to see what the Ogoni people in Nigeria, and you know, during the Ogoni struggle by Ken Saro-Wiwa, who was ultimately killed, he went into the Delta region in Nigeria and raised the awareness of the people. So these are models that have been used, and ultimately he himself was assassinated because of his agitation. So the people must be made to rise up. I've already given you the example of what is happening now in Botswana. I've already given you the example of what is happening with Glencore. You know that suits have been filed against Glencore, and they have been going around the world making ex gratia payments. So I think there is no shortage of examples, and the best that some of us can do is to simply point you in that direction in the knowledge that we must act beyond lamentation. And the other truth is that if you want 10, there are times when you must be satisfied with 6, because you are also dealing in a world which is very highly nuanced. And you are operating in an environment where some of these individuals also have a cartel. So that if you wrong ExxonMobil, you may discover that no other oil company will come into your arena because they control the technology. And you have seen the way they have dealt with Russia during, as a result of the Ukraine-Russia war, that they can even put the mark of Cain, metaphorically speaking, upon your head, that you cannot sell your oil. These are the realities. And you may be shocked. The more you do what you are doing now, you are energizing politicians. And I won't be shocked next week if you have a Guyanese politician say, I'm now going to be the champion for this particular thing, so that he or she becomes a crusader to ensure that ExxonMobil does the right thing, that is in the best interest of the people of Guyana, that is also in their interest as investors. That also must not be forgotten, that they are also in it to make money, but they must not make money that is usury. They must not make abnormal profits. They must make profits, but make sure that they don't kill the goose that lays the golden egg.
Oil companies, when they enter many countries, especially third world countries, they leave them worst off after they would have taken out their assets. They have just entered Guyana. And the point I want to get clear to you is that we are heading worst off as the day goes by, meaning they're plundering our resources, and we are going into debts. Every day that passes on, we're running to the bank to take loans to correct and fix the destruction of what's going on with the oil operation in Guyana. So, in short, what we're receiving at present and what we will be continuing to receive with this deal, it's not helping or putting Guyana nowhere. So I just want to get that.
But see, the reality is this, and I said this at a meeting. If you allow yourself to be boxed into a little corner, you will be eaten alive. And that is why governments have an obligation. And in a matter such as this, where we are dealing with a national asset or a national resource, there is nothing called opposition or government. Every Guyanese has a duty to do that which is in the interest of Guyana. And to me, Dr. Glenn, what I would tell you, you are playing your part. You are playing your part by putting these things in the public domain. That is the contribution that you can make, and you are making. And you never know the straw that will break the camel's back. You continue doing this, continue raising it, and urge others to continue raising it. Because Guyana, coming so rather late into the arena of oil and gas, has many examples to learn from. I've already told you of the Trinidad and Tobago model. I'm aware of models, the Norwegian model. You know, the Norwegian sovereign fund that comes out of oil and gas is in excess of $1 trillion United States dollars. So there are examples of how oil as a resource has been used. Qatar is another example. Sharjah, or rather Abu Dhabi, rather than Sharjah, Abu Dhabi, Bahrain. There is no shortage of companies or countries which have interacted with international oil companies and have ended up using that resource and the proceeds of the resource in a manner that has lifted their countries in an unprecedented fashion. And they are now smiling all the way to the bank, even in countries such as Equatorial Guinea, where the income distribution is not as good as it should be, but you can see what is being done. Even in Angola, although the price of oil has gone down, but when Sonangol was at its very best and they were dealing with the same ExxonMobil, the economy of Angola grew exponentially, and the National Sovereign Fund also did grow. whether, of course, there was some corruption in the arena. So you are in a stage where you have no shortage of good examples to look at. Venezuela has had its problems, but I now know, for example, per capita, that Guyana has more oil per capita than any country on earth.
Thank you.
So that being the case, it is your politician and your Guyanese pride to protect this patrimony and to protect it jealously. So thank you.
You had dinner?
Yes, I have to go now.
Oh, what time is it now? What time is it now? What time is it now?
It's going 10 o'clock our time in the night.
Can you give me a quick answer to the last question? We here in Guyana, like many parts of Africa, are polarized by ethnic relations and politics. These divisions are exploited by foreign investors who want us divided so that they can cart off our wealth. What advice do you have for us to overcome this division so that we can speak with one voice?
And the person who put it so very well was Tanzania, Julius Kambarage Nyerere. Said, when you find yourself in a society where there is diversity, you must emphasize the things that unite you and de-emphasize the things that divide you. And remember that it is in your unity and diversity that you achieve what is in the best interest of everybody else. And that it is incumbent upon those upon whose laps it falls to lead their nations to only appeal to one thing: nationality and unity in diversity, because that is the only medicine which, upon being swallowed, cures all ills. If you allow ethnicity and religion and other divisions to stand in your way, then you are setting yourself up for the slaughter.
Mr. Lumumba, your words today have shaken the foundation of this building.
Thank you.
I hope.
God bless you.
I hope.
And I wish you guys well.
I hope.
And
we can have this conversation some other good time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for taking the time to be with us, Professor Lumumba.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
You too, sir.